Hello. This is Clayton Vance. I am a licensed architect, and just have an opinion that I want to share. It's about this Green New Deal that has been proposed, and I'm sure it's going to be part of this upcoming election cycle this next year. And what are we coming up, 2020? And as we continue as a society to look at energy efficiency, energy costs, the energy usage, how we do this stuff. A lot of this goes back to buildings and architecture and our city design. And I just want to throw my 2 cents in because I think we need to start having some reasonable conversations and look at the text that is used that eventually gets turned into laws which affect you and me and how I can design houses and or buildings for you and the cost of those things. Because I think we've lost kind of our grip on not reality, but our grip on kind of the foundational structures of what makes decent cities livable. So this Green New Deal, it talks about a lot of things, but the 2 things I want to look at right now talks about health, right, and healthcare for everybody, and also upgrade all existing buildings to maximize a bunch of different stuff that we'll go just take a look at. In terms of healthcare costs, it's weird because you don't necessarily attribute health of individuals to architecture and or city design. But I would like to say that there's a correlation more significant than we would like to recognize and realize, because we are a ridiculously sedentary society. I mean, heck, I'm sitting here in my office. I drove here from my house, and I had to go drive to get some lunch and drive back to my office to sit here again. And so all I'm doing is driving. I'm not walking anywhere. And one of the reasons I'm not walking anywhere, number 1 is proximity. Number 2 is it's just an unpleasant walk. And why is it an unpleasant walk? Because the pedestrian experience is just terrible in terms of the architecture that surrounds the pedestrian and the street configuration, and who's actually been given precedent to each other in terms of street configuration, whether that's the pedestrian or the vehicle. And a conversation, a much bigger conversation about that, I think would do a lot to help change how we approach city composition. And I don't want to say city planning or city design because I don't think that's the best way to conceive of cities, but it's city composition, taking all the constituent parts and pieces and bringing them together into one beautiful meal, as it were, all the ingredients into something that works. And to use the food analogy, the closer a thing is to nature, the better it is for our bodies, right? Coming organic straight from your garden, it's just going to be better for you. The more you synthesize materials, the more you engineer nature out of your food stuffs, honestly, the worse it is for your body. We are of nature, and we should be participating in that conversation for our existence. And as we continue to engineer nature out of everything, it's just worse and worse and worse. And the same thing goes for building materials. As we continue to engineer nature out of the building materials, it has detrimental effects on our health and everything else. So let's look at really quick some city design stuff and the sedentary issue. If I were to just draw a whole bunch of dots on my screen right here representing you, me, a whole bunch of people, and how we were concentrated, how close we were in proximity to each other, and also all the stuff that we actually use and need to go. And one node looked like that, and I drew another little dot cluster and another little dot cluster, and I could keep doing this. What happens is if those dot clusters are close enough together, I can utilize a public transportation system like they do in Europe and other places in the eastern United States and be able to connect the dots, right? But if those dot clusters begin to get spread out, and this is just a very simple diagram at a very basic level, and so here's how old cities were designed. They had these old dot clusters that were concentrations of people, And then we began to spread out like this. But when we do cities now, or just subdivisions is all we do now, and big box power centers and that type of stuff, there's no more dot clusters in the center. All it is just, and most of the cities in the United States West, the Western United States, it's just a bunch of dots spread out from each other. And so now, where on earth am I supposed to put my public transportation? Because if I do that again and keep that same sort of node system, if I wanted to get there from here, whereas before it was here to here because everything was so close, and then once you got off the train, you could walk to it. And that's how it is in Europe, and that's one of the reasons why they're not sedentary, is because everyone's walking. It's like, if you've been there, you walk like at least 4 or 5 miles a day in just getting where you need to get. You're on your feet, you're moving, you're mobile, you're active. And so now it's just kind of ironic that we build these gyms and fitness centers that we drive to exercise, rather than just making exercise a part of our lifestyle. Because we've designed cities so that we have to go out and exercise rather than just having it part of our lifestyle. And the crazy thing is I'm not trying to say that, I am trying to say that what we've done is pretty tragic, but honestly, everyone I talk to wants to visit Europe, but they don't want to live in Europe. There are some people who love the city experience, who want to live in the city experience, but most of us actually don't like the city experience, and we want to live in something more of a rural setting, and that's what the suburbs are for, is to give this pseudo-rural experience feeling to all of us. And it's just a very expensive way to build, but if we could figure out a way that's a compromise between the super, super urban and the just straight up just ag rural, I think we're gonna, which is a traditional town, then we'd actually have a conversation that I think can help everyone, where things become walkable. And in order for something to become walkable, the street configuration has to be right, the street width has to be right, the traffic can't be too much, or it has to be slow enough that it's not creating a ton of noise, and the architecture that you're walking by has to be a pleasant experience. Because if the architecture you're walking by is just a giant concrete wall, or just a glass building reflecting your reflection, it's like walking by a mirror for 600 feet. It's honestly not very pleasant. And there's a whole nother conversation about composition and stuff, architectural composition, that we can get into. But right now, it's just a matter of, general health costs. Obesity is really the primary driver of most of the healthcare costs that we have in our society. And that is driven primarily by just really bad eating habits that we have, because we've synthesized nature out of our food, or engineered it out of our food, and we design cities because of current zoning laws in such a manner that we are forced to drive everywhere. Walking isn't even an option. We could walk, but it would be just such an unpleasant experience that no one will do it. And we could bike, and it is just, as a little, side note to all you people who are really, really embracing this Green New Deal and all this other stuff, and green architecture and everything. If you have a car and drive a car around, okay, but don't be super crazy disingenuous about it. Recognize that, dude, I have a car too. And even electric cars, they still take up energy. And until the whole grid is entirely renewable, based on renewable energy, it's going to be pretty problematic. So health. We'd be all healthier if we walked more and ate better. And there's a very important architectural component about that. And if there's anyone who wants to come have a conversation with me on my podcast, please, I invite you to come and let's have a real interesting and reasonable conversation about what are some solutions that we can deal with zoning laws. So the ends isn't efficiency, but the ends is revolves around the individual experience within their own city. The next main point is this idea of upgrading all existing buildings to maximize energy efficiency, water efficiency, safety, affordability, comfort, and durability. First of all, the fact that you even put affordability when you're trying to modify all those other things is obviously says you don't know what you're talking about, because there's no way to maximize affordability when you're going to really tighten down regulations on all those other things. And just as a by the way, what are the buildings that are actually really timeless? What are the buildings that for centuries have stood the test of time? They're very durable. They weren't very affordable, but people built what they could build. And honestly, they weren't that comfortable. Pretty dang safe because they're all stone and brick. Energy efficient. That is a real big question. Right now we have energy codes, right? And we have to become more and more energy efficient. One of the biggest issues that we run into with energy efficiency is indoor air quality. As we've made our buildings so tight, meaning we just wrap it with everything, now all of a sudden we have to reintroduce exterior air to keep the indoor air quality at a reasonable place, that we've lost the so-called energy efficiency. Back in the old days, the way they used to, just be able to heat stuff is radiant heating. There would be a wall with a floor and a wall, and all this would be stone or brick. And then they'd have a radiator heater right next to that stone or brick wall, which would emit heat. And that wall would heat up, and the radiator would emit energy. And that's how they heated buildings. It's a very pleasant energy. It can get way too hot. It's pretty hard to control. And so because we like the control, we like the immediacy of forced air, meaning furnaces and air conditioners and that type of stuff, once again, we've engineered nature out of the building systems of our construction. And so now we're trying to solve this energy efficiency problem in cavity wall construction, which I'm talking about just a framed wall, and then you have some sort of cladding material on the outside and sheetrock and stuff on the inside. And we're trying to make sure air doesn't escape the building. But now we've realized the indoor air quality stinks and everyone's getting sick and miserable. And so now we have to reintroduce outside air, which brings in actually more equipment and more regulators and more cost. And so it's not affordable. It costs way much more money and is, in the end, honestly, not even more energy efficient. And old school houses that were all brick and stone that have a giant fireplace on either end and or in the center. And those fireplaces were giant, massive things of stone, which would keep the heat in. And then it would release the heat over a night's period until daytime, and you start up the fire again in cool areas. And then in warm areas, if you built out of adobes or whatever sort of masonry material, it would heat up during the day, release the heat at night, cool down during the night, and release and keep it cool during the day. And those are just some basic fundamental principles that we don't want to acknowledge, we don't want to design according to, we want to do it our way. We want to be able to control everything. And I'm just telling you, you're going to have so many unintended consequences of adopting these things without talking to the right people or having a conversation about it publicly to realize what we're about to enter into. If people start really endorsing this Green New Deal and the idea of just no planes and stuff, what? Are you serious? It's just crazy extreme. And I want to have anyone on who wants to have a conversation. I want to warn everyone that you really need to think twice before jumping on this bandwagon, because it's going to affect more things than you could possibly imagine. And the costs of all this stuff is going to go out the roof. If you truly want the safest, most energy efficient, most comfortable and durable building, you ought to build in the manner that they did hundreds of years ago. Those are the timeless buildings. Those are the ones that are truly sustainable, truly durable, is all this stuff before we worship technology to a point that we engineered nature out of our lives. So anyway, that's my thought. This is Clayton Vance signing off, and looking forward to your comments. Should be interesting.